Two-time Oscar winner Renee Zellweger is the star and executive producer of NBC's limited series, The Thing About Pam. I'm Denton Davidson, senior editor for Gold Derby, and we're thrilled that Renee is here with us today. Now, this series looks into the 2011 murder of Betsy Faria, the conviction and exoneration of Betsy's husband, and then ultimately Betsy's friend Pam Hupp's involvement in all of it. So, Renee, what is the thing about Pam? How did she just skate by with going unnoticed for so long with this evidence mounting in front of her?
That's what I found so fascinating about the podcast when I listened to it the first time. This escalating series of absurdities just kept leading to the same question: How? I think it's the same for everybody. It seemed like a worthy sort of thing to look into. The thing about Pam is funny. Everybody asks the question, everybody has a different answer. And I always think that, I don't know, the thing is probably the asterisk at the very end of the list of things that you might presume about who she is. The big red asterisk.
Well, one of the fascinating things for me is that she was middle-aged when this happened. So I'm always wondering, like, when you did research about her, or when you've been looking into anything, were there any clues to give you a hint, like she would have been responsible for 3 murders potentially when she was in her 60s? Because she seemed like in her 20s and 30s, she was well-liked and everyone was, enjoying being around her.
Well, there's speculation about the circumstances, the full circumstances of her past, and I'm not allowed to discuss those things because it is just conjecture, and I have to be respectful because we're talking about real people and their lives and what hangs in the balance of what is right now a very dynamic case, because the investigation of the Betsy Faria murder is still on. Pam was just indicted in last fall. So it feels like, ooh, but it's interesting that you bring that up because to me, this did feel like sort of a deep dive investigation into, certain elements of human behavior that might, and like you said, backstory that might lead to a person, influencing a person into making certain choices.
Right.
And what might make them, I don't know, in some way be able to justify them as being logical choices.
And when did you first hear about the case and decide, okay, I want to play this, and I want to go from Judy Garland, American icon, to Pam Hupp, diabolical murderer? Is that, as an actor, do you want to make such a drastic change on purpose, or how do you choose roles like this?
Well, yeah, you never, I don't know. It's a pretty, it's a boring answer. It feels like a very organic thing. Something appeals to you for different reasons at different times in your life. And after the GD experience, I did want to do something that was totally different. Not because, this would be an interesting addition to the string of things that I've done, but just as an experience, I wanted to play in a different sphere. And I feel like, as a person, I just found her fascinating. She's so much more audacious than I am, and there are certain qualities, that she possesses that intrigue me. I was fascinated by, and I thought it would be really interesting to explore those things a little bit more deeply. So yeah, that and doing a network television show, which I've never done before, as the first thing that my production company, the picture company, would produce alongside my partner, Carmela Casanelli, and something that could be on several platforms at once, streaming and in this traditional television space, which I don't know if you're old enough to remember event television, but when I was a kid, if you weren't home for, the Sound of Music once a year, too bad for you. And if it's probably special at Halloween, too bad for you, and too bad for you if you missed the Wizard of Oz. You had to be there. And I don't know, there's something kind of special about that, about, having to schedule an experience like in that way, and to be part of that.
And for those who haven't seen it, first of all, watch it, but also it's a dark comedy. Of sorts, there's comedic elements. How do you walk that line of portraying someone like Pam, who on one hand is an evil person, but on another hand is sort of a ridiculous person almost, and walk that in such a believable and respectful way? How do you do that as an actor?
Well, I love that you mentioned the word respectful, because that's important. We always wanted to keep in mind what was lost in the circumstances of this, of Betsy's life. I think it's interesting, because you don't think about, when you think about, this tragedy, that there's some, I don't know, opportunity to bring levity to it. But it's inherent in the telling of the narrative, according to Pam, in her own words, and what she presented to be substantiated information to law enforcement, local law enforcement, surrounding the case. And because it exists, it just seemed, important to make room for it, so that we could tell the story in a way where I think the juxtaposition would illuminate the tragedy. Like, you can't proselytize about the tragedy of something, but if you can present the absurdity that is inherent in the story, it kind of makes you scratch your head and more deeply feel the loss. So that was sort of how we approached it.
And I'm a total true crime junkie. I'm obsessed with Dateline. I watch it all the time. There were multiple episodes about this, and then they had the podcast, but a lot of the script is pulled straight from some of the episodes that we saw. And you really get her hand gestures, her tone of voice, the accent. How long does it take for you to prepare for something like that? I mean, we saw you do it with Judy as well. What is the time and research it takes to embody a real life person?
It depends, really. What have you been given? How can you optimize whatever it is that you've been given? You just dive in and you don't come out until you're finished. And every night after work, you go home and dig around to see if there's anything that you missed in preparation for tomorrow's work, or you go through tomorrow's work and see if there's something that might be just a little bit more fun if you did a little bit more digging around that night. And a lot of it is just homework, like you're talking about. You put the headphones on and you listen to testimony over and over and over again until you pick up a pattern of speech. And there are certain gestures that are sort of repeated that become a person's personality, and you pick that stuff up. It's just homework, really. And for me, I find it more interesting to stick with it while I'm working, so that I feel like I'm inside all of the information, and I can sort of pull it off the shelf of things that I've kind of collected along the way during the day when we're telling the story. Makes it more fun.
And this cast is so great. But I want to ask specifically about some of the scenes with Judy Greer, because when I watch those scenes, to me, it's just brilliant on screen. And Judy plays District Attorney Leah Askey, and she has this way of making her almost, not quite, but almost as much of a villain as Pam in this series. And she's so great. And I'm curious what it was like filming those scenes with her, what that dynamic was, and was she ever able to break you? Because I feel like some of that would be almost humorous working with her.
Yeah, it was definitely. First of all, let's just talk about Judy for a minute. She's brilliant. You never know what she's going to do, and it's always going to be elevated. You read the scene and then you sit across from her, and it becomes, more fully realized than you could have imagined. She's so much fun. She's a brilliant actress, and I loved working with her. And Katie Mixon, by the way, brilliant, and I loved it. And with both of them, there was that thing that you're talking about. You got to bring your A game and focus. You got to focus, because if you start actually paying attention to what's happening in front of you, you're not going to get through it.
Is that the key? Are you pretty unbreakable? Can you get in there and zone them out?
It takes a lot of concentration. I'll give you that. It takes so much concentration, especially when there's no air in the room and when your body's boiling at about 110 underneath those prosthetics, and your brain kind of left the building about 6 hours ago. It takes some focus. Sometimes I'd have to count.
How much does that prosthetics weigh? Like, what are you sitting under, and how long does that take to get onto your body every day?
Well, we started at about 4.5 hours, and then as you start to sort of finesse your way through the process, you get a little quicker at it and more efficient, and we got it down to just about 2.5.
Wow.
And as you know, yeah, as you get more comfortable with it, you know what should come first and what, you know, to wait till later and things like that. So you streamline, and it got tighter and tighter every day. I'm not quite sure. Um, it was a couple pounds. It was a collar, and it came up to here, and it came there, and everything. I think this was exposed.
You got eyebrows.
Nothing to see here. And yeah, so it was yeah, it was probably a good workout for my neck. I don't know.
Do you like that preparation time in makeup, or do you like, are you just like, get me out of here? I just like, let's get to this.
Oh no, I don't have a get me out of here button. I have the I resign myself to what's necessary, and I find it exciting, you know. and it's hilarious. It was a lot of comedy involved, because you know we have to joke every day about the absurdity of the process and the reaction to glue and whatever else it might be, because it's, you know, these things they're dynamic. They have minds of their own, and the minds of their own, and they do what they want to do, you know. So you kind of have to go with it and make jokes.
Patience. Okay. And Renee, you've won 2 Oscars. So I want to ask a couple questions. We're an awards website. So I'm just curious about what the biggest difference was for you winning your first Oscar for Cold Mountain versus winning for Judy, because it was over a decade between them at very different points in your career. What do you remember about, you know, the first one versus the second one, and what your feelings were like winning each time?
Oh goodness, wow, that's a big question. A really interesting question. And I have to. It's funny. I'm going to have to answer you on the fly, because I don't know that I've ever spent any time, you know, thinking about that. But it might be interesting, an interesting thing to kind of self-reflect on. I know that I was a different person in both times. It's not just that the circumstances of my life were different, but I think a different person and a different artist. And I probably experienced not just the creative aspects of the work differently, but also, you know, the business side of things quite differently in each experience. I mean, the experience itself was the same. It's otherworldly. It's enthralling. It's you know, hard to believe in both instances, and in both instances you sort of freeze and it's hanging. Yeah,
And you've been nominated for multiple times, and you've won twice, but you've also lost a couple. So when you leading up to the Oscars, they have all these precursor awards. There's one after the other, and both times you were winning and winning and winning, and then you get to the Oscars. At that point, are you like, okay, I really could win an Oscar, I better prepare? Versus when you're losing award after award, do you go in a little more relaxed, or is there a difference at all?
I don't think that. Again, I think I'd be making up I'm going to make up an opinion about this right now. I don't know that I've thought about that. I think the experience is the same no matter, because it's kind of hard to believe that it's happening anyway. And I feel like, you know, it's something that you just kind of want to enjoy the celebration that it's meant to be, you know. I think that's probably how I tried to experience it, with just trying to recognize the what it's meant to be. It's meant to be a celebration of this experience that you shared with creative experience that you shared with you know, a lot of your friends, people who are really in your life.
Well, hopefully there's an Emmys experience coming up soon. And we saw on Jimmy Fallon recently that you like to walk to the awards. So will you be walking to the Emmys through Hollywood if you're invited this year?
That's very sweet. I would love to be invited to the Emmys. I've never been to them. Where are the Emmys?
I don't know if we have the location yet, but they're in Los Angeles somewhere. I think they're the weekend after Labor Day, so it's in September. So they're quite a ways off. You have plenty of time to plan.
I guess it depends. I would love to be invited, but if it's like, I don't know, 30 minutes down the 405, I might not walk.
Okay. Well, the thing about Pam, it's on Peacock. It is on Hulu. If you haven't seen it, please go check it out. And Renee, thank you so much for joining us today. It was really a pleasure speaking with you about all of your work.
Thank you. For me too, Denton.